You know, if you have to take a pledge to promise not to be a rapist, you've already failed. I saw this bullshit on Twitter and it immediately pissed me off. It's called #ComicsPledge. This is some shit created by some feminist, he, she, it, however this person identifies, to demonize all men because Cameron McGrabbyhan Stewart and Warren Overrated Ellis and several other male feminist comic book pros have been accused of sexually assaulting or harassing women. This is some performative nonsense that doesn't address a damn thing about the allegations, but it does let these woke men virtue signal, and lets feminists bully them into promising not to do something 98% of them will never do, while also letting those feminists do what feminists do best: shit on men. It says, quote, "Men in comics say no," as if they were saying yes. Find me men working in comics who are pro-sex abuse. Name the people, because that's what this is arguing. And I know people are going to be like, but just some guy. It's not saying all men are rapists. It just says that there's a problem with sexual violence in the comic book community. Yeah, that's bullshit. I watched one of my friends battle with feminists for almost 2 decades. Every time you see something like this, be it a pledge, male privilege checklist, or a consent workshop, the unspoken and sometimes spoken implication is that all men are rapists and they need to be taught not to rape. That's always the case, and we're about to see that right now. Quote, "There are a lot of ideals we claim to honor in comics: hope, justice, unity, innovation, creativity, freedom. None of them mean anything unless men in comics change our behavior and hold each other accountable for the safety of women and all people of marginalized genders and sexes." Right, so there's only 2 sexes, baby, male and female. You've already mentioned women, so who else are you talking about? You don't mean men because you say this at the bottom of the pledge, quote, "We understand marginalized genders and sexes to include, but not be limited to, non-binary and binary trans people, two-spirit, agender, and gender-fluid people, as well as intersex people of any gender. But not men." You've conveniently left them off your list, which means you don't think they're victims of sexual abuse, or whatever happens to them doesn't count. Those are the only 2 logical reasons for excluding them and focusing only on women. Speaking of women, they don't need to change their behavior. Women are just completely faultless. They never abuse other women. They never abuse men. They never abuse marginalized genders and sexes. Only men are responsible for their behavior. Only men should speak up, and only men commit abuse. Oh, you think I'm being melodramatic? Well, let's read the shit. Quote, "I pledge to never abuse, harass, groom, or manipulate women and all people of marginalized genders and sexes." So for the dickless bitches supporting #ComicsPledge, just keep this in mind. You're basically saying it's okay to abuse, harass, groom, or manipulate men. No men are accountable for other men's safety. No men need to change their behavior towards other men. That's all fine, or it doesn't matter. You only need to change how you treat women, and whatever the fuck marginalized genders and sexes is supposed to mean. And of course, no women need to change their behavior, because we all know there aren't a plethora of women in comics and TV and video games who ever crossed the line. There totally wasn't a woman named Julia Vickerman who ended up posting an account of how she's sexually attracted to a 14-year-old boy and stalked him at a carnival and then tagged her post with #pedophile. No, that never happened. I mean, that's totally fine, and is obviously an isolated incident completely unrelated to the gross obsession so many female creators in the industry have with child sex. But I digress. Quote, "I pledge to hold myself accountable for my own actions, to be open to the comments and concerns of my peers, and educate myself." You mean be a fucking adult? You actually need to pledge to do that. You're so fucking inept you need someone to tell you to do this. Where are your parents? Are they still alive? Because if they are, I want to tell them they did a terrible job. You should know better. You shouldn't need a future sex offender to write a pledge for you so you can promise to act like a fucking adult. "I pledge to actively intervene when we see or know of abuse, harassment, grooming, or manipulation." Oh, you mean the shit you're supposed to do anyway. Again, you actually need someone to tell you to do that. Well, while they're busy telling you, maybe you should tell them to tell that to the fucking women who come out of their litter boxes to brag about how they knew the next male feminist was a douchebag. All these women knew this shit about Cameron Stewart and Brendan White and Eric Esquivel, but didn't say a fucking thing. Not until it went public, then suddenly everybody with a crumb of pussy has something to say. If one of you motherfuckers had reported these assholes when you first found out, the problem would have been solved. Instead, you wanted to protect your career, so you kept your mouth shut. Or more likely, maybe you knew that far too many of these accusations are untrue. I'm not saying any of the people who've been accused are innocent or guilty. I don't know. I am saying that way too many of these allegations turn out to be bullshit, either exaggerations, misunderstandings, or flat out lies. There have been way too many cases of women, and it's overwhelmingly women, lying their asses off to destroy some guy who wanted nothing to do with them. That's why y'all have your little whisper networks where you spread rumors about people probably to fuck up their career should they decide to dump you or have nothing to do with you. But I think it's cute that only the men have a responsibility to act when they see abuse. Women, on the other hand, can just keep their mouths shut. Moving on, quote, I pledge to ally for women and all people of marginalized genders and sexes experiencing abuse, harassment, grooming, or manipulation. But not men. So the men who've been victims of abuse, harassment, grooming, and manipulation in the industry, you ain't interested in them. If they need support, fuck them. Literally. This is your method of showing solidarity with abuse victims, by erasing male victims. How feminist of you. I pledge to actively call out our friends and peers, even when no one else is watching. That's a very long-winded way of saying you're full of shit, because your bitch ass ain't calling out a goddamn thing. Nobody's taking the hit for calling out bad behavior. You're gonna wait until someone else comes forward and pile on like the rest of y'all do, because you're all a bunch of fucking cowards. I pledge to commit to this pledge for the long haul, and keep this conversation alive in the industry. Do you? Well, let's start with all the female comic book creators obsessing over teenage sex. Maybe you could talk about how it's always overwhelmingly woke, pretentious male feminists who create shit like the hashtag comics pledge who turn out to be the predators. You want to talk about that? Or are you going to run back to your encrypted app so you can talk about your freaking circus sex in private? Because I'm going to let you in on a secret. The only people taking this pledge are people who have skeletons in their closets or are scared shitless. You either have something to hide or you're terrified of getting canceled, so you'll take a pledge that basically says you're a rapist. Because that's what this pledge is saying, that you need to be told not to be an abuser. It's assuming that because you're a man, you're a scumbag, you're a rapist. You need to be told not to do a thing you haven't done, don't do, and probably will never do. It also paternalizes women and treats them as if they're not responsible for their own behavior, like they're little kids who need to be protected, which is why you're calling people flirting with grown-ass women grooming. You're a fucking adult. You don't groom adults. This pledge is bigoted as fuck. It's sexist. It would never be presented to women, even if you caught the woman in the act of raping a child. No woman would ever be asked to pledge something like this because of how it makes them sound like being female makes you a bad person. You want proof? Add black in front of men. Black men in comics say no. None of them mean anything unless black men in comics change our behavior and hold each other accountable for the safety of women and all people of marginalized genders and sexes. Yeah, sounds racist as fuck, doesn't it? That's what you're pledging to. So have at it. Happy ass is gonna end up getting canceled anyway, because either you're a scumbag or the woman tells a believable lie. Meanwhile, your female colleagues sit there saying nothing, obsessing over little boys' asses, getting a total pass. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.